if you've ever felt like you're losing yourself one tiny compromise at a time, stay with this. We're naming the thing today so you can start to see yourself clearly again.
Okay, hey, this is Francisca and this is my mid-crisis life and today's Monday Mindset. So this week, we talk about a lot of things, but essentially I've been talking about this idea of like covert abuse, of narcissistic abuse, of coercive control that is a really big thing at the moment that is being recognized more and more, particularly in family courts where they're understanding the kind of pervasive nature of coercive control within domestically abusive relationships. So I want to start with just the definition, actually, that's part of the law. I'll read it to you. So it says, the term is unambiguous and needs no embellishment. Understanding the scope and ambit of the behaviour, however, requires a recognition that coercion will usually involve a pattern of acts encompassing, for example, assault, intimidation, humiliation, and threats. Controlling behaviour really involves a range of acts designed to render an individual subordinate and to corrode their sense of personal autonomy. Key to both behaviours is an appreciation of a pattern or a series of acts, the impact of which must be assessed cumulatively and rarely in isolation. I think that's a really important distinction, a really important definition of this elusive, very individual experience of being in an abusive relationship, of there being a level of covert abuse or narcissistic behaviour or controlling coercion, right? And that's the point. It's about understanding and recognising that it's not just this one thing that happens, because my experience of being both in domestically abusive relationships and having a narcissistic and controlling and coercive and covertly abusive parent is that each individual thing ends up being kind of explained away. It ends up being rationalized. It ends up with somebody saying, yeah, but on this occasion, this happened because of this reason. I behaved this way because of this reason, or this worked out like that because of this reason, right? And it makes sense as an isolated incident, and it makes it really, really hard to argue that one thing. But it's about the culmination. It's about the consistency of that behavior that in the end makes you feel, is that necessary? Some humongous fucking lorry coming through. Like, what makes you think that you can come through? Anyway, I'll just wait. So yeah, it's the culmination of all of these things that in the end up just making you feel like you're crazy, that get you to a point where you're so lost in the fog of your own confusion, where you feel like, but I feel in my body feels like this isn't safe. My body feels like this isn't okay. I feel very much like my needs aren't being met. I feel very much like I'm being harmed. But every time I talk about it, there's always an explanation. There's always a rationalization and a perfectly reasonable, mostly, justification for each individual thing. So you just end up feeling crazy, and you end up feeling completely confused and conflicted about why it is that you behave this way. And you end up just internalizing all of it, right? So you start just thinking to yourself, okay, if I could just be better, if I could just be better, if I could just do better, if I could just stop complaining, if I could just kind of get on board with this thing that's not really that unreasonable, right? And you just end up walking on eggshells. You end up constantly trying to please this other person. And this other person is constantly moving the goalposts. So you never really know what it is that you should be doing. So you're always having to check in with that person about whether or not your behavior is okay. And that's what it means when it says that it corrodes your sense of personal autonomy, your ability to make your own decisions, your ability to be able to look at something from your own perspective, your ability to be able to have trust in your own opinion and be an autonomous individual within this relationship, right? And it's like, because of it, right, others are always saying that you're just overreacting, because they're always looking at everything in this compartmentalized way. Like, but you know, if you just look at it this way, it's not really that big deal. Or if you just look at it from this perspective, it's not really that big deal. Or why are you making a big deal out of this tiny little thing? But actually it's a reaction to the culmination of there being this constantly oppressive feeling, this oppressive nature to the relationship that you have, right? And it just ends up breaking down that sense of autonomy, that sense of self. It just slowly over time just starts to chip away at your core, at your value, your own self-value, your own self-worth, your own self-meaning. So that in the end, you start just changing who you are. You start changing yourself at the core. You start compromising and over-compromising your needs. You start over-identifying with this other person because everybody else is saying, and they're saying that you're the one that's being unreasonable, because when you look at everything in isolation, they're not really that big of a deal, right? You start to contort yourself completely, and you start to bend over backwards until your back is literally fucking breaking, right? And it's so insipid in that way. And it's so misunderstood that way that people just end up feeling trapped. And it is the sort of thing that makes you just go crazy or makes you just shrink and you just stop trying. So there's some new research that came out this week that I heard that says that there's a link between childhood abuse, people who experienced abuse in their childhood, this type of abuse, emotional abuse, psychological warfare, whatever else, and people who as adults then enter into domestic abuse. And I'm like, yeah, obviously, like that makes perfect sense, because people who are raised in this covertly abusive way, this narcissistic manner, they get trained to be more and more of an empath, because you're constantly trying to understand and predict somebody else's behavior so that there isn't a reaction, so that there isn't some sort of repercussions on you. And it's usually actually people who are naturally empathic who end up with people who are narcissists, particularly in relationships, because narcissists look out for people who are empathetic so that they can use that natural desire to understand somebody, to learn to see something from somebody else's point of view in order to control and get their own way. And the reason that people grow up to be that way is because they have parents where they've been trained to do that, where they have to be like, okay, I have to look at things from your point of view, I have to put your needs first, right? It's like, not only that, but like there is also born this kind of desperation, this desperate need to be loved, and that love and that positive regard from somebody outside of yourself is a completely transactional thing, that all love is transactional, and that you only get love if you deserve it, and you only deserve it if you're doing what you're told, right? Here's the thing though, right? I think being an empath myself and having strong empathetic tendencies and seeing other people go through this as well, here's what I've learned. I've learned that people like me have a really, really, really high level of tolerance, because we do truly understand the origins, the core of why somebody behaves the way that they do. So we get that you're broken because you have to be broken to treat somebody like this, to behave like this, to only see things from your own point of view, to only want to get your own needs met. You have to be broken, right? And that's why we have so much tolerance. But what I've seen is that once that tolerance level is reached, then it's done. Like, it's done. There's no compromising, there's no more compromising, there's no more malleability at all, right? So I think it's such a complex subject that can't really be whittled down to some small tiny video, but I wanted to just give a quick explanation of some sort in terms of what it means. And I want to also try and help anybody out there who is in a situation like this, who has a parent like this, or a partner like this, or maybe a sibling like this, or finds themselves in friendships that are like this. Yeah, what is it that we can do if we find ourselves in this situation? So I think firstly, there's a need to just stop explaining yourself. Just stop. Yeah, like just notice how when somebody does something to you that doesn't sit right, you feel the need to kind of launch into like those explanations, those justifications, those emotional disclaimers, those contextualizing things and rationalizing things, or that preemptive like apology. Yeah, scared the crap out of me. That's just your trauma pattern talking. Yeah, so just stop doing that. Start saying things more plainly. Yeah, I don't want to do that. This doesn't feel good for me. I'm leaving now. No, no, no justification, no emotional unpacking, no translation, just the truth. I think secondly, it's really important to start noticing when you shrink. Yeah, the moment when you lower your voice, when you avoid eye contact, when you make yourself more pleasant, when you make yourself smaller, when you go into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn stage, which is our nervous system. It's our inner child really trying to protect ourselves. Yeah, when you laugh something off, right? Don't force yourself to be confident. Yeah, just notice that moment when you start shrinking, and when you do, just say to yourself, I'm shrinking. I can just breathe, and that hopefully will be the start, the beginning of your returning to being more expansive, being more authentic. Yeah. And then finally, I think it's really important to start rebuilding your daily self-trust, and doing that through like tiny little acts of preference. Yeah. So people who are raised in coercive and narcissistic environments, they don't often know what they actually want. That's something that I suffered with for such a long time. They only know what kind of keeps the peace in the household, right? So you rebuild your identity by choosing tiny things. Yeah. What music do you want on? Yeah. What mug do you want to pick for your coffee? How do you want your room arranged? What pace do you want to walk at to get where you're going? What time do you want to stop working? You know, and these things, they seem ridiculous, but they're not. Yeah, it's how your nervous system is relearning, like, I'm allowed to exist in this space without having to earn it. That I can just be, that I can just do because I can, right? And yeah, you become yourself through like tiny choices that you practice every single day. Yeah, because here's the thing, right? I think it's important to be able to name the harm, because naming the harm is like the first step, the first doorway to remembering yourself. And then the next step is kind of learning to choose yourself again in these small, daily, unremarkable ways, yeah, until it feels more natural to occupy your own life. Okay, that's it. Come back for Thursday's Chrysalis Tools. We're going to practice some of exactly that.
If something in your body reacted while you watch this, don't rush away from it. Sit with it. Let your truth rise. And come back Thursday. We're going to practice choosing ourselves in real time.